And so I will introduce everybody here. So we have Ria Modak, who's a historian, composer, guitarist, and translator from New York. All of this information is on the handout in front of you, so just summarizing briefly. And Debashree Mukherjee, who's a professor of film and media studies in the Department of Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies at Columbia University, and co-director of the Center for Comparative Media. And of course, Aiza Ahmed, who is the artist whose work is on view here. This is her debut New York solo exhibition, The Music Room, and we are delighted to be hosting this event here today. I will let the ladies take it away.
Sure, so I think we'll just, I'm going to double up as moderator as well. So we kind of thought it would make more sense if Ria plays her piece first, and then we can absorb all of it together.
Absolutely, you can stay.
No, what you
whatever you prefer. All right. I'm going to play kind of snippets of the soundtrack interspersed with whatever this room has been inspiring for the past hour that I've been here.
Aiza for bringing us three together in this very intimate, beautiful, mehfil style kind of immersion in your work. It's really, really quite a pleasure to be surrounded by so much talent. Thank you. So I'm going to basically, the way we're going to format this is, we'll have a kind of a conversation for the next 30 to 40 minutes, after which we'll open it up to questions from the room. I'll try to kind of contextualize some of about the film and a few other things, and try to pose questions to both Aiza and Ria that will hopefully help all of us enter into a collective discussion towards the end. So has anyone in this room watched this film, Jalsaghar, the music room that inspires this work? Okay, that's great, because now you're going to watch it tonight. Okay, so what I'm going to do is maybe just quickly synopsize the film a bit, point to some things in the paintings, and open up the first question. So the film Jalsaghar, it's a Bangla language film, but it also uses a lot of Hindi, Urdu, Hindustani because of the songs that are performed in it. So listening to Ria sing in Hindustani kind of brings back the multilingual nature of the film. So it means music room. It's a film that's very early in the career of Satyajit Ray, a filmmaker that many of you might know of. From his first film, I assume Pathil Panchali, part of the Opoo trilogy. So Jalsaghar is only the fourth film in his very extensive career, and it was made in 1958. Like many of Ray's films, it is based on a literary work, a short story by the writer Tara Shankar Bandyopadhyay, Bengali writer. The film tells the story of a Bengali landlord or a zamindar whose aristocratic upbringing and lifestyle has undergone a very major transformation as new economies of business, real estate, and industry are producing a new entrepreneurial class that is upsetting the old norms of class hierarchy and caste hierarchy. So when we meet him in the film, it's in a very dilapidated and empty shell of a mansion that once used to be full of opulent furniture and all these accoutrements, the little details that Aiza has picked up, the chandelier, the hand fan, the ornate curtains and the draperies. It used to be full of all of this, but now it's in a very decrepit kind of a state. It used to have a retinue of servants, now there's two men, and you'll see them emerge in all of this work. And it used to be full of the sound of lavish musical parties that used to take place in this very grand music room, the Jalsaghar, which is inspiring Aiza's work, and which we are trying to do an alternate to a new age music room. So by the time the film begins, the main protagonist is a very depressed old man in tattered brocade who would rather spend his last savings on propping up his lost glory than on repairing his roof. It is a tragic story about a very deeply flawed man and a deeply flawed time. And yet it is narrated with great empathy by Satyajit Ray. So there's a lot of affection even while the film does create a sense of a critique about what is this nostalgia for. And the film continues to be loved by cinephiles and by artists, I think because it is essentially about the aesthetic experience, a pleasure in music and the arts. And a lot of this is because it also features several of the most legendary musicians, singers and dancers of South Asia, some that you might recognize, the Shehnai player, Ustad Bismillah Khan, the singer Begum Akhtar, the sitar player Ustad Wahid Khan, Kathak dancer Roshan Kumari, in these set pieces, and we watch them all in real time. So with all of that background in mind, right, I'll pose a few questions to both Aiza and to Ria. So maybe I'll ask a little bit about what drew you, Aiza, to this film. So much of your previous work, and we'll get to that a bit later, was also set in a different part of the subcontinent, right? On the western flank, the India-Pakistan border. Now we're in Bengal, on the other side. And both these spaces are obviously highly contested, highly traumatic, but also meaningful in the history of South Asia because of these successive kinds of partitions, new borders, erased borders. Can you just talk us a little bit through how you got to Bengal and to Ray?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was such a beautiful, like, I feel like I was back in the film and the way that you were talking about it, and now I'm in it, and no pun intended also. But the way that I got to the film was during grad school. I was doing my MFA at RISD, graduated last year, but one of my professors, Abhishek Gandhi, had, in one of our studio visits, asked me, do you know the work of, Satyajit Ray's The Music Room? And I was so embarrassed to say that I didn't. And that kind of came up because, he's familiar with the Rococo sensibility, the chandeliers, the kind of urgency to understand these class dynamics, social dynamics, originating from Pakistan, specifically Lahore, so going to your, conversation about the border. I was born in Lahore, but then I left Pakistan when I was 7, moved to London, moved to Dubai, before coming to the US in 2016. So these borders that I'm kind of wanting to trace, and kind of understand and process, but I'm an old soul, I'm thinking about the past and I just want to trace my ancestry. Where did I come from, and how does that fit in? And so for me, looking to cinema has been incredibly fruitful to understand a time that, I wouldn't have access to. So for Lahore, which is where that India-Pakistan border ceremony takes place, I went there when I was really young, and it's vividly in my mind because then the changing of the guards happened when I lived in London, and so there's a lot of the theatricality, the pomp, the hyper-masculine spaces are kind of ingrained in my mind. But then, I've been interviewing my grandfather before he passed away, and then my grandmother, who's the last surviving grandparent, and doing these oral interviews, and trying to understand, her journey, because she was born in Dhaka, in present-day Bangladesh, and so that whole region is a place that I want to be familiar with. And so then when I, see that this film is rooted in Bengal, in that region, in this time of, it's set in around the 1920s, 1930s, pre-partition, 1947, I was just drawn to this, just so much to understand and unpack. So that's kind of how I started thinking about this film and that exploration.
So I want to pick up a little bit, and I think this will open up to both of you, this idea of cinema as a kind of an archive. This search obviously for thinking about ancestors, but also cinema is the space where a lot of that memory, those places are archived. For Ria, this is a very challenging film, I would imagine, for a young musician to speak with or respond to, because it's also such an important archive of some of the most intimidatingly famous and talented musicians of South Asia. So my question to you is, how did you take up that challenge? Were you intimidated? Were you thinking of it as a conversation with, a response to, an expansion of, a correction, an intervention? And what do you think is the relevance of this kind of Hindustani classical memory for millennial, Gen Z, South Asian peoples?
Yeah. The film is, in some ways, an intimidating archive, as you say, as you listed the kind of stalwarts of the tradition, and also the original soundtrack was made by Satyajit Ray, who was an iconic sitar player. But at the same time, Ray himself had a very interesting relationship to Indian classical music. A lot of his early films were scored by Ravi Shankar, Ali Khan, and he hated working with those people. He was like, you guys are so dogmatic, you don't know what film music means. I don't want like heavy rock-based melodrama at every turn. And so even in Jalsaghar, he is editing some of Ali Khan's choices. There's one scene where he overlays a very chaotic Sibelius symphony when the protagonist is like going crazy in his music room. And then also, it's good to have this. For example, there's a theme that Jalsaghar Khan wrote for the protagonist, which goes like. It's like sprightly and cute. Zamindar because he himself benefited from the patronage of such courtly elites. And when Ray hears his theme, he's like, this is too nice. You're being too sympathetic. And so part of what I did in the score is to take this theme and turn it on its head and make a kind of fugue out of it. And so I was kind of following Ray's own disenchantment with the whole dogma of Indian classical music. So on the one hand, there's obviously a great respect and love for the tradition. You can see in how the scenes are shot and how much respect is being given to the musicians in it. But on the other hand, like, Ray wasn't a reverent guy. And so I took that as a liberty to be irreverent to myself. And to the point about Hindustani music now, the great Apurva Mudgal, who's a wonderful singer from Aga, my dear friend is here. And we have had a long collaboration of kind of drawing from Indian classical music, but moving it into different territory, playing with the West African harp, the kora, playing with this instrument, which is evil-tempered and certainly not traditional. So people continue to evolve the tradition as it has always actually been evolving.
And there was a new record by a young Pakistani artist that does a lot of this. There's a way in which, right, the Hindustani world flows across these borders. And I think there has been a way in which a lot of young people are kind of taking it up. We'll talk more about that, but I want to go back to the point about irreverence in Ray himself. And I want to think about irreverence in Aiza's oeuvre, right? So if you look around, and we talk about the themes in the paintings, but look at the people also in the paintings, and look at the kinds of, the way Aiza's chosen to use lines, use a kind of blurriness, use smudge, and her obsession with noses. This is an ongoing obsession. We might need a deep therapy session to get into that. But what I'm trying to kind of draw your attention to is that there's a way in which, Aiza, you approach a lot of characters. Most of them are men, but there's a way in which you kind of undercut some of the pompous gestures or practices they might be involved in the moment through a certain kind of a drawing style. It could be called caricature, satire, something cartoonish, through this kind of exaggeration of features. So can you talk a little bit about this technique that you've developed of this kind of satirical drawing attention to the absurd in like minute gestures in which you kind of capture people, not just people at a border, like in the border ceremony, but characters in a film as well?
Absolutely. So my practice it's quite interdisciplinary practice. You might have sculptures and cutting out of woodshop and painting and drawing and thinking about installation. But drawing is really the root of my practice, and this is something that I kind of grew more confident in over the years, specifically with a blind contour style of drawing. So if I'm drawing you, I'm engaged in this close looking and letting my hand kind of unfurl. Letting my hand just unfurl and thinking about what does it mean to do something blind, to lose that control. I also can't see without my glasses or my contacts, so that's on a personal level if we're really thinking about noses, and it's always body parts at this point. But so when I did that kind of that blind contour drawing, which just emerged during COVID actually, when it was a very surreal time, and I had to kind of move from my thesis at Cornell when I was doing my undergrad, moved home to Dubai, and then moved into a very tiny sketchbook, and that's when these ideas really emerged. I started thinking about these distortions that would occur. If I were to look at the subject, in this case the film or the border guard or anyone really, because I'm drawing all the time in my sketchbook, it's thinking about the kind of overlapping, thinking about the economy of line. How do I capture someone's expression? And because I am an avid observer of people, it's this muscle memory that I think I've developed, over time. And then when you talk about it being predominantly male, yeah, that's something that has happened, over the years, and it didn't really click until I look back at the work that I've been making over the past, years, and it's because that's ingrained, whether it's looking through history books or whether it's just my stage of attention in art, just men, and I'm like a relatively smaller person, just having to look up, it's they're all around me, and then it's this kind of charged encounters and interactions in these public spaces, whether it is in Pakistan or in New York. It's always having to avert my gaze or look away or look down. So that's something that starts to happen in the characters themselves if you notice their gaze and where they're looking. So sometimes I think that maybe I'm just kind of thinking about how I'm looking around and it happens. But going to your point of the caricature, I didn't intend for it to be this kind of satiricalness. It just so happened with the way that I've been drawing, and now I can't distort women the same way. It doesn't. So you'll see some here and there, but it doesn't feel right. There's this kind of visceral reaction within where it just doesn't feel right. But with the men, I just take, as you said, the irreverence, right? The kind of that freedom, creativity that you can just do whatever. You just exaggerate their noses if you need to.
So one thing that I find very interesting in your work as a film scholar is your real attention to mise-en-scène. Everything that's in the frame and the attention to mise-en-scène in a film. And this I picked up on obviously because the Vaga work also does a lot with all the stuff. So mise-en-scène is everything that's in the frame, including props and things and furniture. And the way you kind of really highlight and center things, there's a huge kind of curtain over there, right? This chandelier that keeps propping up, a kind of balustrade, the stair banister over there, right? There's just columns, pillars, they're almost bigger than the people and themselves. Can you talk us a little bit, and like over there in that blue painting, just kind of submerged on the top right corner, right? This architectural kind of a detail. Can you talk us a little through what these things do for you? Because I want to get at eventually with thinking with Aiza about a certain commentary about the past, about history, and what role do these things play? There's obviously an interest in something baroque, something opulent, but there's also a way in which you're theatricalizing these things, right? By just focusing on thingness. Can you just talk us through some of that?
Yeah, there's so much there. I'm going to definitely lose my trains of thought. But, thinking about the lives of objects, like I look at that chair in Music Room 3 and just the way that the film revolves around him just sitting on this chair. And so I think about the architecture, what is upholding the spectacle, whether it's, in the film itself, and this kind of mansion that's crumbling, or at the border, these bleachers, and it's built like a stadium. It is a theater, and to me, I'm so drawn to the idea of theatricality, the kind of the absurd, the pomp and the drama, and to understand what does it all mean, and then when I think about the chandelier and this symbol of, like, where are we putting a chandelier just in the middle of a deli, for example, what does that suggest? These ideas of class, upward mobility. There were other things that I wanted to think about, but looking at whether it's a person or an object, it carries a soul, right? There's something that can be said just within an object, and thinking about ancestry, thinking about time, how objects are passed down, and especially in the film where he has all his ancestral portraits and he's always looking up at them and he's always referring to lines and bloodlines, and even the mirror, it kind of feels like his portrait in a way, but then he does have a portrait painter probably behind you with that little figure who's just the minor character, but he becomes more important, right? Because he's kind of again upholding, staging this figure into a sort of history that is being forced upon.
Actually, on that point, can you tell us who this is and what he's carrying in his hand?
Yeah, so this is Ananta, who's one of the household staff, and he's holding a hookah, like a shisha pipe. And this is just from the first scene, where it enters and the landlord is sitting on his roof, and he kind of asks him, like, oh, what month is it? He's so out of it, and he's thinking about memory, and it is those shadowy figures and minor characters that I'm really drawn to, whether it's the courtesans or the staff or his wife, or who are really holding this place together.
So I want to think a little bit about that, right? What month is it? Where are we? What is the season? Because there's a lot of that atmospherics that Ray really foregrounds in his film. and that you're also gesturing to. And that I imagine, Ria, for you was also very important, because one of the first questions I asked Ria when we first met was, how accurate is the raga used in the film? Because ragas are also for different times of the day, and the film has both day and night scenes. But the ragas, I mean, you should tell us. I'm not the expert.
Yeah, well, before, maybe related, but before that, I think the point about minor characters is especially important to me as an instrumentalist who often accompanies singers. And I'm just always lurking in the background. And I love this little guy with his dhoki, his little maroon cap, playing the sarangi. And our eye just goes to him because he has a pop of color. And there's a real serenity to his little mustachioed face. And I feel like there's a lot of restitution of dignity to the minor accompanist, which I personally appreciate. And to the point about rag, I mean, some of it is accurate, but it's also never really clear, as we were discussing, what time it is in the film. Partially because it's black and white, partially because part of the protagonist's descent into chaos is not knowing.
He's always moving between past and present, his memory and reality.
Yeah, so for example, the opening scene of the film where you have this like oscillating chandelier that comes into focus is set against Rag Tori, which is a super intense rag that's usually played in the early morning. And even the treatment of that rag is like not at all traditional. It's against very rhythmic violins that almost sound percussive. The actual sound of the melody is like kind of abrasive on the ears. And so the whole spirit of Thodi is kind of also incongruous with what it's supposed to evoke. And then, you know, you have kind of snippets of Rag Dehad or Rag Kamsavani, which are not really played at the right time, but do evoke the right emotion, which I think goes back to Ray's feelings about Hindustani music. It's like it's not going to be the right rag at the time. It's going to be the right rag to evoke the right feeling.
Yeah. So much about these questions about mood, emotion, the tone of a moment. One can understand with music, right, how you kind of evoke that. So much of it in art seems to me, at least as a layperson, come also from the use of color, right? Now, obviously, Ray's amazing artistry can be seen in how it's a black and white film. But he's able to do so much with music, with composition, with choreography, with mise-en-scène. Aiza, you introduce into that black and white imagination all these colors. Can you talk us through some of the use of the pinks, the browns, the sepias, the blues? My initial reaction to the blue was a reaction to thinking about another threat that's encroaching on the Zamindar's life, which is the ever-encroaching river Podda. Because the Bengal Deltaic region is very known for its riverine threat, but so the river is both a source of life, but constant flooding. So if you've ever read, say, Amitabh Ghosh on his new ecological climate change turn, he's always talking about Bengalis have always lived with this kind of sense of threat, because there's always these islands that emerge one day, submerge another day. There's always that, so for me the blue was that, but it's so much more. So if you can talk us through some of the use of color. Is it about mood? Is it about your mood? Is it about what's happening in the film?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so I started, as I talked about having a little sketchbook and just drawing, I just wanted to expand that sketchbook. So I started with Music Room 1, which is, it's just browns and black and white predominantly, kind of as an homage to the film, and just kind of focusing on the composition. So the first time that I watched the film was without subtitles. I mean, I can't speak Bangla either, I mean, I can speak Urdu fluently and understand it, but for me it was about just the gestures, the body language, the costumes, and just interactions, so I didn't even, it was actually better not to have the dialogue, so I didn't get distracted and I was just engrossed in what I'm seeing, giving some sense. And so I just had it playing, and I would just keep pausing it at these moments in the film that I was drawn to, and then I would kind of paint a face and create these worlds within a world and think about that idea of fragmentation. And then I moved on to Music Room 2, which is behind us, and I was thinking about the idea of a layering. You know, people are so layered, places are so layered. How do I translate that into paint? And so that kind of happened here, and I'm just always drawn to the color pink, and wanted to have a limited palette and thinking about paint as a crumbling walls in this space. And then Music Room 3, which is the more kind of antique brown furniture homage in a way, but also spending more time with it, burying parts of the painting, rescuing them, more atmospheric. And this is all done in oil paint, so it does mimic that idea of ink, of watercolor, of drips. And because the film is so much about the decay and deterioration, as I started painting, it was one of those magical eureka moments where the paint started dripping, and it kind of echoed everything that the film is about and that I was thinking about. So that was a little studio moment. But, and then the fourth one, as you say, Music Room 4, is definitely perhaps the most washed away, the most layered. I was thinking about how these soirees are often held at night, so I wanted to make a nighttime painting, but also the kind of fuzziness, the blurriness, the memories that are kind of in those shades of blue, and then absolutely when you came and saw the work and you was thinking about climate as a silent character in the film, it all made sense. I think someone came in and was like, oh, you could call it the night river, like these two kind of things that you're thinking about.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Maybe I'll ask one last question and pose a last comment, because it's so important to you and it's so important to Ria as well, this idea of the minor characters, right? So what does it mean to kind of highlight someone like this, who I don't know how many lines he even has in the film, right? So these are people that are on the sidelines of the main narrative. And I think in your Vaga work, which is based on real life events, people or figures that are on the sidelines of the big stage of history. So I wanted to just actually read out something from a scholar of an Indo-Fijian scholar, because I'm very interested these days in the history of South Asian indenture movement to Fiji, who writes about what does it mean to write a history of those who are submerged in official archives. And he says that instead of trying to write or look for some of these figures, were not there in the official archives because they were so minor, considered so irrelevant, one could try and write a minor history. And this is what he says, minor history, and did I say his name? Sudesh Mishra, shout out. Minor history is not defined by the absence of momentous events, it is characterized rather by the presence of quasi-events, or events whose eventful status is in dispute. So they don't seem like eventic things inside the theater of major history. Minor history is made up of small dramas, but dramas, that inhabit the lower depths in the disguise of footnotes, fragments, digressions, curious asides. So can you talk us, and Ria as well, about these ideas of the minor character, and a minor history? Do you see your work as intervening in this theater of major history by foregrounding the footnotes in a way? Are these the footnotes in a sense?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much there's so much to unpack there. I'm gonna let Ria.
Well, maybe I'll point to some of my favorite moments of your work and let that speak for me while I think of something more intelligent to say. That in Music Room 1, directly behind you, there's Bego Mukhtar in the corner, who, with her eyebrows like totally uneven, and she's in the film. There are 3 major performances, and she's singing in the first one. And the way the film is shot, you actually barely see her. You see everyone looking at her. Men smoking their hookah. You see Ganguly, who's like moneylender, nouveau riche, oozing self-made prosperity, kind of an asshole figure. You see him like biting his nose and looking confused.
Looking for the next glass of wine.
Yeah. Like clearly not cultured, doesn't know how to engage with the music in front of him. You see everyone looking at Vishwambar, the protagonist, so that he has registered that they are having a good time. And only in between these shots of people looking at the musician do you sometimes get a glimpse of the musician. And so here, she kind of used her head moves, they're like little inky figures at her, like beneath her, like little ants. And so that's like the most precise encapsulation of minor history for me in this whole project is how agency and power and a kind of sense of respect is restituted to a figure who historically also, I mean, I won't get into the history of courtesans because that's a whole thing of its own, but this is, at the time of this film, this is the last generations of divides and courtesans. And so that whole culture is one that's in decay and one that has been criminalized by the colonial state and also by kind of nationalist Indian politics. And so there's a special kind of love I have for that little square.
No, and absolutely, and what you say about they're all kind of looking at each other, so it becomes more about the music room as opposed to the music. I think that's something that was really exciting for me to think about, because it's always about the drama, you know, about the idea of a show and who's there, who's not there, who was upholding it, you know, and the moments when the household staff just come in and take a peek. I mean, that just makes everything, you know, it puts everything into perspective. So it's just that performance of masculinity, and then within that, thinking about the class hierarchies, right? There's so many layers, right? Which is exactly what I was trying to do with the paintings, with the cutouts. That how do you kind of pull them apart and interrogate them in different ways? And then with the sculptural cutouts, I'm also thinking about the language of staging, the props, the kind of the idea that you can walk around them and you can see their backs, you know, it's kind of peeking behind the curtain, the kind of the great reveal, and the fact that if I just unscrew them from their hinges, they would just go falling flat on their face. And so there's just those subtle gestures that I'm thinking about. And I think when you were playing and I was kind of taking in the work again, I was thinking about weight and line, and how that variation, it's so subtle again, but yet it's so monumental at the same time.
On that monumental note, I invite everyone to join us in this collective conversation. If you have any comment, a thought, a question, you want to point at something.
Can I just add something on the minor character note? So my introduction to this film was through Aiza's work. So when I watched it, these characters I saw and I thought that they were going to be main. I remember when he walked on, I was like, oh, that's him! You know? I thought he was going to have many lines. Exactly. So I feel like for my perception, you totally changed the perception of the film, because what I was paying attention to was guided by your eye and not, you know, what the narrative was. I just wanted to share that.
And that's really cool, right? Because you encountered the work through Aiza first.
Yeah.
It completely changes the meaning of the film when you will watch it tonight.
Yeah.
So I like that conversation. I think it's past and present as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I'm calling it.
Oh, again, and I just wanted to also add, we didn't get into how we know each other, but I think that was really important, because this was back at Brown and I was at RISD, and I was taking a seminar that was co-taught by Professor Holly Schaefer and Shazia Sikandar, the artist. And that's when, you know, they invited Ria and Purva to come in and just and play and perform and serenade us. And I was just blown away to think that, to add the other layers, add another element. And then, you know, when I, in parallel, was working on the music room, it was in the back of my mind. And so then when it came to the idea of putting on a show, putting together an exhibition, that how do I bring together these other histories, and so your sonic interventions and layering completely, like everything comes alive, you know, even if you just focus on one moment, it's wiry, you know, the lines are not static, they're not stable, they're in movement, they're in motion. So yes, very grateful, you know, to have had that encounter and then have you on this journey. And so yeah, I'd love to hear how you're responding to this.
I think I'm so mesmerized. Also just, you know, I'm especially drawn to everyone's eyes in your paintings and their general like gazes, where they're looking and what they're doing. And also the fact that it was really big among those music that we started playing together when we first met.
Oh, wow.
And we performed it at so many metals now, and you know, I'm going to be leaving New York soon. So it comes full circle. Seeing her here and seeing Ria play. And yeah.
Did you know that Begum Akhtar used to be an actress in the movies? If anyone wants to watch a film starring a very young Begum Akhtar, before she's Begum, I will tell you what.
Also, there's so much that pulls me personally about your choices of the minor as the major, because there's so much of a story behind why this character is minor and what put them there and why are they in the place that they are and others are in the places that they are. So there's a lot of drama happening behind someone's small appearance, which I think is so attentive of you and so magical to bring out like this.
And to your point, I think about the accident of birth. That's like that big question, and I'm always, like, why is someone born into a certain family and why are they not, and why are they, I mean, it's questions, that you don't get any answers, and then even tying it back to the way that I'm drawing, the lines never connect. They're empty, they're porous, you can enter into them, you can go out, but there's space in them, because the lines do not. So for me, I feel like a detective wanting to trace and bring together these fragments of oral histories, of cinema, of observations, and kind of put them together when they don't actually, just imagine, reimagine, and it's like a lifelong fuel.
Any other comments or questions or?
I have a question. And I'm certainly going to watch the movie. I'm just wondering, does the entire movie take place in the house? Because I find that really changes, like, in a single set movie, it can either feel like the entire universe or like really claustrophobic, depending on the direction. So that would affect how I view the paintings.
So it's all pretty much in the house and the space around it.
It's still his property, right?
It's all his
land.
property,
Yeah.
and it's that space around it starts to become like a beach because the river starts moving closer, and something really big happens on that beach. But it's
in that little figure.
Let me just but the mansion itself is huge, and its character keeps changing as you move from its past glory to its present state. So there's a big terrace space, there's a big music room space, there's a little outside porch space where people enter and exit. There's different spaces that seem quite big. What do you think?
Yeah, I think each of the different elements of this crumbling mansion have their own vibe to them.
Even the bedroom, right? And that important scene with the son and the wife.
Yeah, where he's teaching his son how to play instruments.
Yes.
And then to the point that he himself is tone deaf.
That
was like a bit of a
this is
fun
one of my
fact
favorite fun
as
facts
we
about
watch the
film.
film.
Is that the actor who plays Bishambar, the Zamindar, is tone deaf. And so there are all these. I was reading Andrew Robinson's biography of Ray, and Ray is commenting that, I just wanted him to look like he was enjoying the music. And he didn't know how to do that. And he would just look off like really high and gazing,
pretending to like.
It's like, I can't use any of this footage.
It's a performance. Exactly.
He's failing to perform connoisseurship and expertise because he doesn't. There's also at the very end of this chapter, while they were filming a scene, or while they were filming one of the scenes where a brass band comes and plays, Chubby Bishwash, the actor, is like, "Wow, this band really sucks." And Ray says, "Well, it's a village band. What do you expect? They're not exactly, masters of their craft." And Chubby says, you should go and conduct them. You should go fix their playing." And Ray says, no, I couldn't possibly do that. And so Chubby Bishwash himself goes, dressed in his zamindari outfit, and goes and says, 1, 2. And then there's some, which I think is the exact opposite of his character, but very fitting to this mismatch between actor and role.
I really like how you're bringing to the fore, and this is something that resonates with the work, a lot of the ways in which, if one thinks about the history of the production of the film and all the behind the scenes, all these are metaphors for thinking everything that's off stage in the big drama of history, the behind the scene, the margin. That there's some kind of sabotage happening from inside the film of all those ideas that at first glance seem like what the film is about or what these histories are about. Right? It might just seem like why is Aiza giving us this kind of homage to aristocracy and elite like connoisseur culture. But there's a way in which there is a sabotaging of those ideas by focusing on certain elements. And I think Ria is also pointing to how a lot of it is present in the film and its making itself.
And you were talking about the idea of legibility, right? And how Ray himself doesn't. Like there's that ambivalence. Like what does he actually think of this aristocrat? If I don't know what I'm going to say.
There's sabotage again.
Want you to say that. I refuse.
Maybe we have time for one more comment. Two more? One more!
This was a fabulous conversation. A question about your process. I was thinking these are paintings that evoke a film. So it's a very interesting conversation between like cinema, the art of the 20th century, these older art forms that we associate with previous centuries. But it seems to me that they're also symptoms of the digital moment. Because how are you pausing, poring over details? Right. So much of contemporary film scholarship is about turning cinema into an archive of the 20th century. Because you can pause it finally.
Right.
And look at where the extras are, who the extras are. So could you talk a little bit about that process of how you were watching the film?
Yeah.
Were you blowing up parts of the image to look at them closer?
Yeah. And because it was so fuzzy, right? And
Yeah.
I'm trying to zoom in and I can't see how his eyebrow looks, but I'm imagining what it looks like. And then also thinking about those cinematic devices, all montage, collage, right? And even the way that I'm painting are these fragments kind of put together into a larger scene.
Also projecting it onto your wall. When we watched
it
together, we watched it like very comfy on Aiza's couch, blown up on the wall.
Yeah. And then I did cropping, right, to be able to crop into a moment and just take what I want. But then, for example, it looks like the column is coming out of his head. And so to have that ability to just play and experiment, exactly what you're saying, those devices of pause and fast forward and go back and then layer. There's so much there.
And also the difficulty of turning something that's intrinsically a moving medium, made up of a sequence of serial shots into one frame. I think that's where a lot of this collage, like there's editing here, you're telling us a story here, but it's happening in one frame instead of us having to watch linearly a whole movie.
The non-linear.
Yes. Thank you so much, both of you.
Good.
This was such a joy.